Did you know that for most of history, people thought that diseases were caused by demons possessing someone's body, that the earth was flat and the center of the universe, slavery was ethical, and that women were less important than men? Luckily, the human species has evolved to a slightly more enlightened state, and we now know better. Philosophy is the means by which human beings have been able to liberate themselves from the unproven assumptions and preconceived notions of our culture's history. Philosophy allows us to reject the bizarre traditions and ideologies that are associated with our society. Philosophy allows us to live lives that are both real and informed. In other words, philosophy enhances personal liberty. A liberated person lives a guided and authentic life, and their judgment is always right. This is the hallmark of someone who has achieved enlightenment. In this video, I will take you through the 3 most powerful philosophical teachings you must implement today if you want a meaningful and fulfilled life. But before we continue, kindly press the subscribe button below if you're watching for the first time, and give this video a thumbs up for that YouTube algorithm. The first philosophical teaching that you should never forget is that you are not the center of the universe. Most people have a bad habit of exaggerating their own importance. This habit comes from what experts call egocentrism. The egocentric point of view is the tendency to see the world as mostly about you. Those who are egocentric are full of themselves and believe that their own ideas, beliefs, and values are the only ones that matter. The truth is that we are all susceptible to the influence of our own egocentric prejudices. Egocentrism can manifest itself in a variety of ways. The 2 most common forms are self-interested thinking and self-serving bias. The inclination to express and defend beliefs that are agreeable with one's viewpoints is the self-interested bias. Almost everyone falls prey to self-interested thinking from time to time. College professors, for example, are generally in favor of tenure, paid leaves, lower teaching loads, and a strong faculty voice in university administration. Similarly, the vast majority of the medical community supports legislation that makes it harder for physicians to get sued for malpractice. Likewise, most factory workers agree with laws that require advance notice of job termination, and most American voters agree with changes to how campaign money is spent. For instance, it's only fair and upholds basic standards of human decency to give someone a notice of termination before actually terminating their employment. But when seen from a psychological perspective, it's quite possible that one's own self-interest plays a substantial role in such matters. People often fail to consider the ethical consequences of their judgments and actions. It may be seen as normal, but from a philosophical point of view, this kind of reasoning is unarguably self-centered. Selfish assumptions are always evident in such thinking. People don't tend to ask themselves, what makes my wants and needs more important than everyone else's? Philosophy opposes such subjective views, and instead teaches us to evaluate data and arguments in an objective and unbiased manner. It also teaches us to always treasure the truth, even when it is painful to do so. It's not difficult to understand why people tend to overestimate their potential or influence. We all like to feel good about ourselves, and hardly think of ourselves as being average in some respect. The second philosophical teaching is that group-centered thinking is misleading. Philosophy forms a crucial part of personal development and societal enrichment. One of the constant truths of human behavior is that most people, the majority of the time, believe what they are told without questioning it. Philosophy tells us this habit is self-defeating in more ways than one. Group-centered thinking prevents you from thinking clearly and objectively. It makes you think irrationally by tailoring your thinking towards the group instead of yourself. Group-centered thinking manifests itself in 2 forms. Number 1, group bias. This is the tendency to view one's own group, it could be a nation or tribe, as being fundamentally better than others. People seem naturally inclined to hold inflated views of themselves, their families, their communities, or their nations. For most people, group bias happens unconsciously, and majorly from childhood experiences. It's common, for example, for people to grow up believing that their society's beliefs, institutions, and values are better than those of other societies. The consequences of this form of thinking are that most cases of human conflict, intolerance, oppression, and greed come from ingrained biases. Number 2, conformism. This is the tendency to blindly follow the crowd, its conduct and beliefs. The pressure to belong is considered one of the most powerful motivations behind most decisions we make every day. Paternalism, one's upbringing, the family or community life, the norms embraced and encoded in the life string of a family, and the kind of rigidity exercised within the family setup greatly determines whether an individual will grow up nurturing qualities of independence or naivete and passive surrender to the whims of the environment around them. Most people with self-esteem issues are often the products of broken environments and poor upbringing. Personality is primarily a product of the environment in which one is nurtured. A dead environment, as they say, produces dead minds. The fourth philosophical teaching is that unwarranted assumptions affect your judgment. To make an assumption is to believe something to be true without any proof of conclusive evidence. Almost everything we think and do is based on assumptions. For example, suppose the weather report calls for rain. In that case, you may take an umbrella with you assuming it's going to rain, because that's what the meteorologist said would happen, and it's their job to provide the public with accurate weather reports and predictions. There may be no proof that any of this is true, but we acknowledge that it's wiser to take the umbrella than to criticize the information. Although we often hear the injunction "don't assume," it would be impossible to get through a day without making assumptions. In fact, many of our daily actions are based on assumptions we've drawn from the patterns in our experience. You go to class at the scheduled time because you assume that class is being held at its normal hour, and in the same place. You don't call the lecturer each day to ask if class is being held. You just assume that it is. Such assumptions are warranted, which means that we have good reason to hold them. When you see a driver coming toward you with the turn signal on, you have good reason to believe that the driver intends to turn. You may be incorrect, and it might be safer to withhold action until you're certain, but your assumption is not unreasonable. Unwarranted assumptions, however, are unreasonable. An unwarranted assumption is something taken for granted without good reason. Such assumptions often prevent us from seeing things clearly. For example, our attraction to someone might cause us to assume that he or she feels the same way, which might lead us to misconstrue that person's actions. Stereotypes. One of the most common types of unwarranted assumptions is a stereotype. The word stereotype comes from the printing press era. You see, plates, or stereotypes as they called them, were used to produce identical copies of one page. Similarly, when we stereotype, as the word now implies, we assume that all the people, irrespective of their character, ideologies, culture, or background, all think and act the same way. When we form an opinion of someone that's based not on their individual qualities, but rather on their membership to a particular group, we are assuming that all or virtually all members of that group are alike. But because people are not identical, no matter what race or other similarities they share, stereotypical conceptions will often be false or misleading. How do we adopt the stereotype syndrome? Ideally, stereotypes are arrived at through a process called hasty generalization, in which one draws a conclusion about a large class of things. In this case, people, from a small sample. For example, if we meet one American who drinks coffee every morning, we might jump to the conclusion that all Americans drink coffee every morning. Or we might be tempted to make a generalization from what we've heard from a few friends, or read in a single news story. Media advertisements, the news, movies, and so forth often encourage stereotyping, thanks to how they portray groups of people. The assumptions we need to become most conscious of are not the ones that lead to our routine behaviors, such as carrying an umbrella or going to class, but the ones on which we base our most essential attitudes, actions, and decisions. If we're conscious of our tendency to stereotype, we can take measures to end it. The final philosophical teaching that you should remember is that religious dogmas are dangerous. In most religious setups, there are rules, regulations, dogmas, and principles that govern those religions. For example, some religious sects don't allow the congregation to ask or question the leader's authority. The word of the leader is the law, and any attempt to interrogate the leader's character quickly leads to extradition from the congregation. Today, it is not uncommon to find in some churches cards resemblance to those used by football referees, being the darling companion of the pastor or shepherd. These cards are used to determine whether one joins the inner circle of the administration, white card, whether one deserves caution and warning for attempting to talk, yellow card, and if you're established to be talking and asking so many questions, detriment to the authority and his team of the inner cycle, and you deserve extradition, red card. In such churches, a flock is not supposed to talk, but to listen and take what they hear as the gospel truth. The rigidity that characterizes some religious groupings is also a major impediment to sound reasoning and critical thinking. Dogmas of certain religious groupings and churches are explicit. The roles of men and women are defined. What to wear, what to do during prayers, how to behave, when to get married, what to eat, and what time to pray are all spelt out. In such establishments, members are judged by the level and rate of their faith and not reason. An emphasis is laid on faith, setting them free, but not reason. The common words that characterize these sects are faith, submission, loyalty, obedience, and generous tithing. People are not supposed to think, but to believe. Understanding philosophy will help you avoid making silly personal decisions. All of us have at one time or another made decisions about consumer purchases, relationships, personal behavior, and the like that we later realized were seriously misguided or irrational. Philosophy will help you avoid such mistakes by teaching you to think about important life decisions more carefully, clearly, and logically. Your life will improve exponentially if you start practicing the philosophical teachings discussed in this video, and people may just wonder how you did it. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Let me know what you think, and remember to like and subscribe if you haven't. Until next time, have a great day.